gonna clean this out. And there you have your bone broth, nice and rich and brown. You should have easily 1/4 inch or more of good fat floating on the top of it. I know that sounds for some people kind of crazy to say good fat, but that's where a lot of the fat soluble vitamins are and a lot of other nutrients that actually get mixed in with the fats. If I was to put this in the fridge, it would be, once it's cooled off, much thicker, almost like a gelatin or like Jello. And that's because of all of the connective tissue that's been boiled down into the broth, and that's actually the medicine. Once I'm at this stage, basically what I want to do is either freeze this as it is, use this over some Tupperware containers full of the meat from the original roasting chicken, and because of the amount of fat in it, if I cover that meat in a Tupperware container and then put it in the freezer, the fat there would actually protect it from freezer burn, which I can demonstrate in another video. But what I'm going to actually do with this now is I'm going to get a bunch of vegetable leftovers that I've saved over the last few days from other meals, and I'm going to put the vegetable leftovers into this broth so that I can get all the minerals and electrolytes and vitamins and things like that out of those vegetables. And then I'll have an even more enriching broth that again I can freeze as it is, freeze over some meat, or just put the meat back in and some more fresh vegetables and make a good soup. So we'll look at that in just a sec. So the next step in making your bone broth is to take what you've filtered through, pour it back into your pot, and do it very carefully and slowly. Because typically you're going to get a little bit of sediment at the bottom, and you're going to want to let that settle out. So I'm going to let that sit for a couple more minutes, maybe just at a bit of an angle, just to let the sediment settle some more, just to get some of that cleared out. Now what I have here basically is a bunch of leftover vegetables, and it's an interesting fact to know that almost 70% of the nutrients that actually are in the food you buy are typically in the parts of the food, at least vegetables, that we throw away. A really good example is squash skins, because most of the nutrients are actually in the skin. So we're going to throw that into the pot. The green part of the leeks that typically you're not going to put into a saute or a sauce, full of flavor, full of nutrients as well. Root of the cabbage, or the stem of it anyway, an extra leaf. Some onion skins, lots of flavor, some nice color that comes out of the skins, especially if you're using red onions. Carrot tops, lots of nutrients in there. There's some carrot sticks left over from lunch. The leaves and top of celery, most people just cut that off and throw it away. Full of nutrients, full of flavor. Get that in there. Just the ends of a couple of zucchinis that were for part of a salad this morning. Throw that in there. And I typically take 2 or 3 bulbs of cloves of garlic, and just basically press them down with my hands, squish them, get them to open up a little bit. Skins and all, throw them in there. And for myself anyway, because of the amount of fat, the amount of gelatin, the amount of really rich flavors that are in a good bone broth, I usually take about half of a good root of ginger, chop it up into really large pieces, and then throw it all in here into the stock, into the pot for my bone broth, just because I want something to cut some of that really intense rich flavor. So I'm going to let this sit for a couple of more minutes, let it all settle down. Then I'm going to probably just carefully pour off anything that's clear, any of the fat that's floating on top again. That's the good stuff. Now I'm going to cover the vegetables and all the leftovers that are in here with water, but not much more than that. And then I'm going to cook it for about 3 or 4 hours. After that, I'm going to strain all the liquid off, and that'll basically be the stock or the bone broth itself. Then you're going to take that, mineral-rich, nutrient-rich, vitamin-rich, everything that you need in there. You probably live on it, honestly. Well, I can't be sure of that, but it's a good possibility. And then I'm going to probably freeze half of that for later use, and then I'm going to take some of the meat from the actual chickens that I roasted about 3 days ago, put that back in there with a bunch of vegetables, and make myself a really, really good soup. So, we'll come back and see that, and then you'll basically know everything you need to know to make a really rich, intensely nutritious bone broth. So I'm just going to skim that last bit of the broth that we had separating out on the counter. It's got just a little stirred up again. And the idea here again is to scavenge basically every possible molecule and nutrient out of the bones and the connective tissue, the skin, as possible. So the second to last step is to take some fresh parsley and just break it up and put it in probably about 10 minutes before you're actually planning to be done cooking the broth. And this just adds a nice little bitter kind of sharp flavor. And again, just another thing to take that slight greasiness out of the broth. So I'm going to let that stir in and simmer for about 10 minutes. And then we're going to strain it all off, pour lots of hot water over it to get everything we can out of it. And then we'll be done and we'll have our first nice big jug of bone broth. Okay, so here we go, the final step. We're just going to strain off all of that plant material. And again, I want to use this hot water to make sure I get everything I can. Just going to put that plant material into another bowl. And then just take some more hot water, pour it over top of these vegetables, just to get anything else I can. And I may run out of room here, so I think I'm just going to pour some of this into another container. Okay, so we're just going to get this as clean as we can. And just let that strain for a while. And as you can see, you're producing a very, very rich, dark brown bone broth. Now, if you prefer a clear, more consommé, you probably want to use white wine instead of a red wine. And make sure you don't cook it at a high enough temperature to caramelize any of the meat or connective tissue, or especially the skin. So again, at this point, you'd be freezing some of it. What I'm going to do with this broth is to actually make a big pot of chicken soup. So I'll film that as well, but that'll be in a different video. So I hope you've enjoyed learning a bit about making traditional bone broth. And I wish you could smell this. It smells great. So have a great day, and come back and check out our next video. Thanks.